Hello everyone and welcome back to my Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 Insane Mode Efficiency playthrough. So, this is map 3, and we're still on the tail of the Imposter King and the Kidnapped Emperor. This map is the bane of a lot of players who would like to play quickly, because even though it seems like this is the sort of map you could just walk into the next town because we're chasing after them and trying to get to the next town where they're going to be headed, this map is actually a route map. You're not allowed to just walk into the next town. People who have played Shining Force 1 might remember a map that's kind of similar to this one, which is the second map of that game. In that game, you can actually walk into the next town, or I guess it was actually the first town, and escape the map and end the map early. For some reason, they didn't add that as an alternative win condition in this case, which is kind of annoying. I actually would have made kind of for an interesting dynamic for the map. But instead you just have to kill every single enemy. So, following up on the previous map where we started grinding friendship experience, that's actually going to come into use starting on this map. Most important of all is going to be Synbios' attack support. It's hard to overstate just how important this support is throughout pretty much the entire game. The attack support is really a big factor in why Synbios is a good unit in the first place. Without that, you could probably make the case for putting the resources into another unit. So at the very beginning here, you can see that Dantares hit one of the masked monks, and then Synbios followed up, and now he is considered a partner with him. So now they actually have a friendship bonus as long as they're standing next to each other. He actually gets +5 attack, which at this point in the game is a very significant amount, especially considering how Dantares is already one of our best units. So you might remember that at the end of the last map when I destroyed the barrel, I said it gave us access to an accessory called the Iron Bracer. Accessories like this that you can find in the early game are especially valuable right now because you can't buy accessories until Chapter 3. And for certain players, if they don't unlock a certain condition, they actually get it even later. So the Iron Bracer gives +2 attack, and I of course immediately gave it to Synbios. And some of you might be wondering, why give the Iron Bracer to Synbios if you think he's such a mediocre unit? When you can just give it to Dantares or Hayward and make them even better. And the main reason for that is pretty much because I want Synbios to keep pace with my other units. He starts off weak, but he has really good growths. In fact, he's one of the few units who can gain 2 attack per level unpromoted. Like I said, I'm not going to save Scum for that, but it's nice when it happens. So even though he has a pretty bad start, he's going to come into his own. And even without that, you really want his HP and defense to be at least decent, so he doesn't just die immediately to everything. Obviously, if you want him to be upfront and giving out the attack support bonus, he can't just be dying, and also that would give you a game over. Okay, and at this point in the map, we get a bunch of reinforcements onto the map. It's nice to see Servant Band come out, and they're just like, oh, let's go get those Republic scum. Like I said in the previous map, this doesn't change even if you get Garage. Like, it's not even like the numbers thin out here. The exact same thing happens. So when this first happens, you might get a little scared because, you know, they just added like 7 new enemies onto the screen. And they do, you would think on Insane Mode, they would actually be even scarier because these are all lance-wielding soldiers and they all have weapon triangle advantage against Synbios. And yeah, they can do pretty good damage to him, depending on what kind of block you leave him on. So on normal mode, they actually only have 10 attack. And in order for them to have 10 attack while wielding bronze lances, which they have equipped, they actually need to have a base attack of 3. So that means in Insane Mode, where you multiply their attack by 50%, they actually only get 1 extra attack. So they're actually not that much stronger than they are on normal mode. So this is one of those maps where you think like when you first look at it, you would think like, oh, this is going to be very hard on Insane Mode. But because of the way Insane Mode works, this map is actually just not very different than how you play on normal mode. I mean, the big difference here is that they have their defense multiplied by 50%, which is always annoying. So you can barely do any damage to them. And that's where the friendship bonuses are going to come into play. Another thing worth noting about these Saraband Knights is that their AI is kind of weird. You can see that when the Knights spawned and they actually could have attacked Dantares, who was out in the open, they actually just rushed past them and just started going straight for what's probably Synbios. I'm not entirely certain how exactly the AI works, but they don't behave like typical enemies. And they also have an aversion to the forest tiles, so much so that even if they could get a kill, sometimes they just straight up don't enter the forest, which is kind of interesting because at the beginning of this map, or when the knights spawn, King Benetram, who is traveling with you, actually tells you that you should stick to the forest and not let them attack you. And this makes sense both from a game mechanics perspective, but it seems like they also changed their AI such that it would also be helpful. So in the forest, you get a 30% terrain bonus. So you get like 30% off of any attacks dealt to you. You can see that anytime you see a unit moving, you can see the LE changing. That's the land effect or the terrain effect. It's pretty straightforward how that works, I think. But on this map, in addition to the forest actually giving you a ton of defense, which is very helpful, it seems like the AI functions differently on the Saravan Knights, which you will see in a second. So one thing you've probably been noticing me doing is that sometimes I use Grace using healing herbs instead of just using her MP to heal somebody. And sometimes I even go through the trouble of actually passing healing herbs from other characters onto her before using her to heal. Trading in this game does actually take up your turn, so it's not like in some other games where you can like trade your entire inventory over to someone at once. So you're only going to see me doing that when there is a notable amount of downtime. So if you're familiar with this game, you already know this, or if you're not familiar and you bothered reading some of the experience gain, you probably noticed that the main reason I do this is because Grace actually gets the same amount of experience when she's using a healing herb as when she casts a heal, or she gets like a similar amount of experience. She always gets at least 10 experience when doing this. When anybody else does this, they usually only gain like 2 or 3 experience. So the game is pretty heavily encouraging you to use your healer to heal. And this is also going to be the case with some other healers we get later on who are monks instead of priests. So we're going to get to see Hayward getting his attack bonus here, and he does 9 damage using the attack bonus from Synbios. I mean, he was going to kill that knight anyway, but I think that's a really good showcase, for a good first showcase as to just how powerful friendship bonuses can be in this game. In fact, in some cases, you're going to be doing like 1 damage to an enemy, and having good support bonuses built up is pretty much the only way you're going to break through a lot of these enemies in any reasonable amount of time. So planning out your friendship bonuses is actually pretty important. So you could, so in the previous map you saw that I was grinding the friendship rank between Synbios, Dentares, and Hayward, and that's because these 3 have pretty synergistic support bonuses. Speaking of which, I think I should probably quickly mention the support bonuses that Hayward and Dentares give, since I have been focusing a lot on Synbios' support bonus. Synbios is probably the most useful for obvious reasons, but Hayward's is also very good. So Hayward actually gives, Hayward and other archers give a critical bonus. Now this is going to not be so important near the beginning of the game because your critical hit rate right now is pretty low, except when you have weapon triangle advantage. However, later on in the game, along with a critical hit support bonus from Hayward, you can actually get like 60 or 70% crit on every single engagement. And that's obviously very useful, and it's a big part of how you speed up some of the later maps. And obviously, if you're standing next to both Hayward and Synbios at the same time, you're going to have both enhanced attack and enhanced critical hit rate, and obviously and needless to say, that's very useful. So I mentioned earlier that the Saravan Knight AI is kind of weird, and you're going to see that come to play here. Synbios technically has 2 slots open for the enemy to attack him with, or the Saravan Knights, and they can actually combine to get a KO on him, as you'll see here. So they do 6 damage each, and this other knight actually has an opportunity to come kill Synbios, but for some reason he just decides not to. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the game seeming to have a customized AI for these enemies here. So I don't exactly know how it works, but we're going to take advantage of it. So going back again to the support bonuses in this game, Dentares' support bonus reduces crit rates on you, and that's really not that useful. So I would say that's the one thing. That's the one downside to Dentares as a unit. So even though he has pretty good personal performance, and I think he stays pretty useful throughout the game, the crit reduction support is of limited use. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is a route map, and you might be thinking immediately, well, would you be able to save turn to be split up your force and have half your team go kill one boss and have the other team kill the defense commander? And the answer is I've tried that, and I find that it is very unlikely. Usually one team finishes killing one boss and the other team just takes forever to kill the other boss, because you usually send Synbios onto one side, of course. I mean, he can't be at two places at once. So whoever he's supporting, either Dantares or Hayward, is going to help him kill whichever boss he's with first. And then they're going to have a hard time meeting up with the other group afterwards. And it ends up taking up even more turns from what I found, because in the meanwhile, the other team is just like has less damage because Synbios isn't around. So because of that, it's actually, at least so far in my experience, it's much faster to just take these enemies out one group at a time. This does end up in a situation where you're going to see like there's going to be like a dead turn where I have to walk all the way across the map, which isn't that bad because our units actually have a lot more movement than it might seem. But it is one of the annoying things about this map. You're also seeing those bats flapping around the mountain. They really don't seem to... They also seem to have like slightly different AI on this map. They seem to only start caring about you once you cross a certain threshold of the map. So right here, well, Masquerade gets the counter, which is completely unnecessary because she does 1 damage. But you're going to see here that she is very close to dying, and I'm not really going to bother with her. And one of the reasons for that is that silver ring that I said I got from not saving Garrosh was given to Masquerade, and that's mainly because I want her to be able to be out in the open a little bit more without dying. Sometimes I need to put her in a position that is somewhat dangerous so that she can find a spot to cast her blaze spell. And in cases like that, I really don't want her to be dying to like stray attacks very easily. Now right here you can see she got a guard, but it's actually completely unnecessary because I'm just going to show the stats here real quick. The knight has 11 attack and Masquerade has 8 defense, and she was getting land effect anyway, so that knight wouldn't have killed her either way. So I do make kind of a minor mistake here because I make Masquerade heal herself when I could have just healed her with Grace to build a bit of friendship. I probably panicked unnecessarily a little bit just to get Masquerade's health back up. I do these recordings in one take, and I don't use save states or anything, so that's also why you might see me occasionally screwing up inputs and generally not doing any sort of gambling strategies and that sort of thing. So yet another good showcase of just how good the attack support is. Dantares actually one-shots that mask. Well, he had enough damage to one-shot that masked monk. If I haven't been beating him up with using Masquerade just to whack him a little bit, he still would have been able to kill him in one hit. Now you might be wondering like why I'm even bothering to attack stuff with Grace and Masquerade at all. And that's because weapon ranks in this game actually increase your magic power as well. So it's actually still worth hitting things with Masquerade and Grace after they've exhausted your MP supplies, or if you want to, on the turns you want to save MP. The only time I think you should not be attacking with Masquerade is if you want to go out of your way to be grinding up your support ranks. The map is starting to wind down now, and we have a little bit of time while we finish mopping up the rest of these units. So I'll talk a little bit about the weapon ranks in this game. So you can level up your weapon rank up to 3 times in this game. When you gain 70 weapon experience, you get to level 1. When you gain another 80 points after that, you get to level 2. And then another 100 points after that, you get to level 3. So basically 70 experience level 1, 150 experience level 2, and 250 experience level 3. When you're unpromoted, you actually get capped at 150 weapon experience. So you can only reach level 2, and you actually can't even train beyond that and work towards level 3 if you decide to promote late. You also can't use more advanced weapons in the game when you're unpromoted. So even when you're playing casually, this actually comes into play quite a bit. Because as you might be able to imagine, players who really like to grind will be around the mid-game when they're reached level 10 for the first time and they're open to promotion. If you stay there and decide to train all the way to level 20 or whatever, not only are you going to have a large section of the game where you are unable to train your weapon ranks, but you're actually also going to be locked into weaker weapons for a long period of time. So even when you're playing this game super casually, or just you really like the RPG elements and you want to grind everybody to your max potential, it actually does pose its own unique set of challenges, so that can be fun by itself as well. But going back to leveling up weapon ranks, when you're attacking opponents, the amount of experience you gain, I think, is based on how much damage you deal to the enemy. Basically, if you deal 20% or less of the enemy's life in a single attack, you will gain 1 weapon experience, but if you deal more than that, for every 20% extra, you'll gain another point of weapon experience. So, you know, like 21 to 40%, you'll gain 2 points, and so on. It is worth noting that you cannot play around this using AoEs. If you use AoEs, you will only gain the largest amount of weapon experience from, I think, whatever single target you deal the most damage to. So you can't ever gain more than 5 weapon experience in a single engagement. So I guess you could argue that's one small way Masquerade is punished, but, you know, she really doesn't feel it. For healers, they also gain weapon experience, but they only gain, I think, 1 weapon experience every time they cast any healing magic. And status magic only gives you 1 point of weapon experience as well. So weapon ranks are a little bit harder to train on healers most of the time. But obviously it also means they can train it when they're not standing in any danger, so that is, I guess, a balancing act there. Now, weapon ranks in this game are not based off of the weapon class. Like, it's not based off swords, lances, and axes or whatever. There's actually multiple subtypes of each weapon, and each subtype of weapon all have their own set of special critical attacks. And a lot of the fun in this game when it first came out was just hunting for all of these special attacks, because even though the graphics, I guess, have aged quite a bit, this was considered pretty much top-of-the-line graphics back when the game came out. Although, because of the way the game is set up, you are clearly encouraged to use certain weapons with certain characters. So, for example, Synbios starts with a sword equipped, and the best weapons in this game for his weapon class are swords anyway. And a lot of the characters that join later on have certain subtypes of weapons already trained up, so there's no real reason to go around replacing them other than just to add a bit of variety to any replays. So I get a critical hit near the end of the map here. It's obviously not really necessary. I'm going to cross over into turn 15 anyway, and that will be plenty of time to kill this guy. But you can see right here, and like once again, you can see right here just how good support bonuses are. We're just shredding through this guy when normally it would take way longer. Another note about support bonuses is Grace, since we're seeing her on screen right now. Because Grace is a healer, she's actually one of the ones who's going to be able to get support bonuses with a large portion of the force. That's one of the more interesting things about healers in this game, especially Grace, because she's the only one who's going to learn Aura. She's in a more casual playthrough, Grace can actually become ridiculously powerful, but that's not going to happen in this playthrough. So we finally take out the boss. So that's Battle 3 finished in 15? Too many turns. I'll see you guys in the next one.